Welcome to Tour Overland. I'm Dan and I'm going to be talking about what it's been like living with a Disco 4 for the last 6 years. Great bit of kit, isn't it, this tailgate? Really handy. So we got this Disco 4 back in 2019, and the reason we needed an even bigger vehicle at the time is we were upgrading from 2 children to 3 children. And my Audi S4 Avant at the time, which I really did like, just didn't fit 3 car seats in the back, so it wasn't particularly practical. So we were looking at something which I would be happy with, and also my wife as well. And I've always liked the look of the Disco 3s when they came out, and also subsequently the Disco 4s. So we were looking at what we could afford at the time, and our budget at that time, we were looking at early Disco 4s. So I was looking at Auto Trader, eBay, you name it. Facebook Marketplace wasn't so much of a thing back 6 years, to be honest. But anyway, I was having a look there. This one sprung up reasonably close to where we were, and we went to go have a look. Immediately smitten. Really lovely, really lovely thing. The size as well, and the space you get inside the cabin, the luxury, all of these things very much won us over. But with that, it's a big car, it's a Land Rover product, it does cost money. And there's a few things that you have to chip in, don't you, when you've got a vehicle? You've got your insurance, you've got your road tax, you've got your maintenance costs, and also you've got your fuel bills. So there's a number of things over the years as I've upgraded things and replaced bits and pieces or added to it, where I've not been helping things like fuel economy particularly. But it's all in a good cause, isn't it? So what's it actually been like living with a Disco 4? So I'd say for the first 2-3 years, we were keeping it pretty stock. The only modification, if you like, that we made is pretty soon after buying it, I ended up buying some Pirelli Scorpion all-terrain tyres because we were travelling into Europe over the winter period and we needed tyres with the 3 Peaks stamp just so we could legally drive on some of the roads. So we got those, and that also then opened the door for doing a little bit of gentle green laning or some pay and play days at some Land Rover events and things like that. So we did a few bits and pieces. Again, I quite like the fact that it just looked bone stock and we just go and do these things without any great issue. Really quite impressive. And then what did we do then? So that was about a few years, and then we got an itch to go travelling. So we were looking at things like rooftop tents or other means of travelling, and as you can see here, we ended up going for an iCamper Sky Camp, which has been an amazing bit of kit. So we got that 3 years ago. With that, we needed to get a roof rack. So lucky for me, on Facebook Marketplace, I found a Patriot roof rack, which, if you're not aware of those ones, they make some really high quality aluminium roof racks here based in the UK. So I picked one of those up for a bargain price local to me. Very lucky. Also fit an awning because it is useful when you're out and about and making camp for that. But anyway, those things don't work into the actual running costs and living with, do they? So what have I been having to do since I had the car? So for the first 3 years, I calculated I spent this grand sum of £1,400 on maintenance. That includes getting it through MOTs and also includes those Pirelli Scorpion all-terrains that I mentioned, which were about 600 quid at the time. So my first 3 years, I was like, happy days. This is not too bad at all. Very, very, very cheap motoring in the scheme of things. And to give some further context, that Audi S4 Avant that I mentioned, so this was a B6 variant if you're into your Audis at all. So this is from 2003. It was before Audi got too in your face with huge grills. It was really quite subtle, but it also had a thumping 4.2 litre V8 in it, which was a lovely little thing. But it's also notorious for timing chain guides, which are made of plastic, going brittle, breaking, boom. Not good for your engine. So I had the death rattle 6 months after buying that, and that costs £5,000 to get fixed. It's arguable, was that worth doing on a car which was probably worth about that much? But we'll park that for another day. But anyway, it just meant that those first few years of this ownership with a Disco 4, I was thinking this is really cheap motoring for what you get. And you know, also bear in mind, I didn't have a warranty because it was sufficiently old enough, and I think when we bought it, it was just ticked over 100,000 miles. So there weren't really any warranties of any value that would be worth having. So we're just going, well, we'll just pay for whatever crops up. So that was the first 3 years. Then, you know, that covered a period where we did go on a big 2-month trip with the family, with a rooftop tent down France and also down to Spain, and then sort of coming back up to the South Devon coast where we're based. And, you know, that was all really very lovely. Then some of the Disco 3 or 4 foibles, you know, those things which need to get replaced, they're not, you know, they've only got a certain amount of lifespan in them. And also bear in mind, this is a 2010 car. So when parts start getting 12, 13, 14 years old and they're well used, they need replacing. So some of those Disco 3 or 4 specific ones, well, particularly with Disco 4 in this case, so inlet manifolds. So they're made of plastic for some reason, and over time, plastic gets hot and cold, it gets a bit brittle, hairline cracks form, and hey presto, you get an engine warning light. It goes in restricted performance mode because, you know, it's not measuring the right amount of air. So we've had that a couple times. We ended up replacing our inlet manifolds separately. So the first one went, and it was about 18 months later that the second one went. You can save a little bit of money if you get them both done at the same time. So that is worth considering. But I think we just thought we'll just sort things as they come in that particular one, because also it's not particularly cheap. It was about £900 the first one that we did, and about the same the second time round. Other things, this is more Disco 3 and Disco 4 specific. So the electronic parking module, so for the electronic rear handbrake, that seized and bound on and was just completely jammed and broken. So we ended up getting that replaced. The parts is really quite expensive for what it is. It's about 700 quid or so for just the part. The labour, you know, it's a bit of a faff, but it's probably half a day at most and you're done. So we got our local garage to do that. So that's been done. But also we went with that option rather than doing a rebuild kit, because at the time this was our daily motor. So we wanted it to be reliable and, you know that we could use it. So we got that sorted pretty quickly. Other things that we've done being the alternator, but again, any vehicle that can happen. We've had a coolant pipe which got a little split, which we needed to do, but no drama, you know, doing that myself. And then about 18 months ago, there was the biggest one that we've had, and it's fairly substantial. It needed a couple of new turbos. Not particularly cheap, and if you're familiar with the Disco 3s and 4s, then they're basically got a separate chassis and body on top. So you need to split the two so you can get easier access to the engine and drivetrain and those types of things. So £4,000 lighter, getting that done, that was a bit painful, and that sort of maybe helped skew the money a little bit, but also you've got to be real. Again, at that time, I think those turbos, as far as I know, those are still original. They've done about 150,000 miles. You know, those things can happen, but also got them replaced with good quality parts. So, you know, again, touch wood, they should last for a good while yet. So I was going through and sort of totting up. So after my sort of £1,400 first 3 years, suddenly quite a bit more over the preceding 3 years. And yeah, I sort of figured out that spent about £11,000 of maintenance over the 6 years that we've had the vehicle, which comes to a little under £2,000 a year, which if you break it down like that, I don't think that's too bad at all for what you get, particularly when you compare it to some newer vehicles where you're paying £300, £400, £500 at least a month just to have the thing on your drive. I mean, maybe the buggeration factor is not there in quite the same way, but I'd argue it probably is, because, you know, you're being a lot more precious with the vehicle. With this, not that you can see in this, but, you know, this is well used. We're not too precious with the bodywork. It's hard to be when you live down our way in South Devon, because the lanes are so tight and narrow. You're just getting scratched on. It's unavoidable, really. But there are a couple of little things we've done to sort of help ourselves a little bit. So things like the wheel arch trim, the wing mirror trim, and a few other cosmetic bits we've sprayed with black Raptor paint, which is just a little bit harder. I also like the aesthetic and the look of it, so that works well. So yeah, coming back, maintenance cost, about £11,000 that we spent on those 6 years, And also that's heavily skewed where one of those years it was the turbos, one inlet manifold and a couple other bits and pieces, which I think came to about nearly £6,000 in that year. So that was a particularly painful one. You know, that's an outlier though. So most of the other time, just keep on top of the regular things, you know, change the oil every year, things like that. We've done the brake pads and discs all round. They're not particularly expensive. It's, yeah, I would say from my perspective, pretty straightforward and not particularly expensive motoring. It also does help if you can do bits and pieces yourself. So I'm fairly competent with doing bits. Things like the turbos I wouldn't do because I don't have a ramp, I can't lift up. I also don't have the time to be able to try and figure out how to do that. But yeah, and then, you know, what else do we have with the vehicle? So we've got our maintenance costs. We've got tax, the road tax, which is quite expensive on this. This is right at the upper end of how much you're paying in this country, in the UK. And it comes to, give or take, £700 in a year. So that's a fair amount. The insurance is fairly comparable as well. So that's around that kind of area at the moment. I've had it cheaper in the past. It's just a little bit more now because it's being used for business purposes as well. And what else do we have? And then we've got the fuel costs. Yes, the fuel costs. So before any modifications, running more stock tyres pretty much, and no giant slab on top of already what is a giant slab of a vehicle, then on a run, we'd be getting 33 mpg. That would be, you know, pretty realistic with a bit of stop start, you know, just on a longer run. And then over the years, that's kind of crept its way down as I've added bits to the car. So it's now, you know, if we're going on a run, we're probably looking at about 28 mpg. And then, you know, driving around the lanes where we are now, we're getting about 25 mpg. It's okay. I think it helped actually having that Audi before, because that was, you know, you're lucky if you're getting 20 mpg in that thing. So I think that's helped. So I guess, yeah, maybe my main tip here is, if you're going to go to one of these, have a more expensive car to run beforehand, then it makes this feel very cheap. You know, so that's one tip. But also, I mean, you know, it's a perspective and things, isn't it? So I've now sold it, but I did have a little Clio 182 Cup, which I was using my little runabout. Complete contrast to this, great fun, pretty cheap in parts and things like that, but also that had its little weaknesses. And over the last, you know, 18 months, if I was to compare my ownership of that and with this, I had to put more money into that to keep that running. We also have at the moment, what's our primary sort of family wagon, is an electric car. So we got that through a lease through one of my businesses. And I'm not going to be talking too much about electric and sort of EVs right now, but I like them. You know, they're really good. And if you can charge at home, the running costs are really, really quite cheap, particularly when you compare it to this. So, you know, again, but then we're paying a few £100s a month to lease it, you know, and effectively a long-term rent. So then when you factor that in, you know, I've totted up the tax, the insurance, and, you know, say an average maintenance budget per month, this comes in at £280. You've then got the fuel costs, but then, you know, that's so variable depending on what sort of mileage you're doing. For me, that's really quite good value for what you get. These are, in my view, one of the best all-round vehicles you can get just anywhere. I think, you know, aside from the aesthetics, I love how they look, the comfort levels, the space, the practicality. So because it's so boxy, in the back you effectively have a van, so you can just put whatever you want in there. In this, you know, it's very practical to pack. I think in another video I'll talk through how we actually pack as a family for when we go overlanding and sort of longer distance travel. My mantra there is just keep it simple, stupid. So we don't have much in terms of the fancy kind of pull-out drawers, you know, sort of leisure battery setups, things like that. There are so many solutions out there which are simpler, lower tech, less to go wrong, cheaper setup in the first place. It's kind of, yeah, that's where I stand on that side. It's been the best vehicle that I've ever owned, and I've owned 25, in my time. But the balance you get, practicality, the performance, you know, on the road as well as off the road, which we're using, it's hard to match, to be honest. I can't really think of any other vehicle at this sort of price point that offers all of this type of thing. You're kind of getting more into the realms of something which is, you know, sort of the aesthetics more important, or, you know, something like that. But this is a really great bit of kit. Yeah, let me know how you've been getting on with your Disco 3s or 4s, if you have them, or if you're thinking of getting one. I've had this 6 years, I know it intimately. So if there's something you want to know, some of those sort of common weak points, some of those horror stories you hear, I feel like I'm pretty well informed to better help share what I do know. Yeah, and thanks for joining for what is the first video in Tour Overland. It feels pretty strange doing a video, just talking directly to a camera. But I'm sure it'll get more natural, eh? You know, that's what they say. But yeah, until next time, cheers.